What is impossible? 150 years ago, this was impossible. 120 years ago, this was impossible. And 70 years ago, this was impossible. By 2050, our planet will be home to 9 billion people. And feeding everyone may seem impossible, but that's just because it hasn't been done yet. At Mosaic, helping the world grow the food it needs isn't just our job, it's our mission. Roughly half the world's crop yields depend on fertilizers. And like the scientists, engineers, and innovators before us, we believe new technologies can solve old problems. Our diverse team of talented people around the world is helping us feed the world by approaching old challenges in new ways, enhancing soil and crop health, pioneering new ways to help plants thrive in stressful conditions, enabling farmers with digital access to agriculture products, sustainable practices, and insights from around the world, deepening our commitment to protecting the environment, creating biologicals that enable plants to pull nitrogen directly from the atmosphere, slow climate change, and promote sustainable farming, fortifying our supply chain, and strengthening our ability to get fertilizer to farmers, automating our operations, manufacturing safer and faster, and finding efficiencies to help make food more abundant. We're even helping farmers grow more food with less fertilizer. With the world's population soon to reach 9 billion, Mosaic does more than imagine an impossible future. We design it, engineer it, and build it. So, what is impossible? It's just something that hasn't been done yet. Mosaic. We help the world grow the food it needs.
Good afternoon, everybody. Big Iron Day 2. Welcome to our market seminar here, 1:30 market seminar. We'll be holding seminars every afternoon at this time. I'd like to take an opportunity real quick to introduce you all to our guests, our distinguished panel. From my right, we have Kristi of Van On & Company. Next, we have Tommy Grisafi from Advanced Trading, and Total Farm Marketing's Naomi Blohm. Thank you all for joining us.
Great panel, rock star panel as far as I'm concerned. We're going to hear a lot from them. Before we get started, I'd just like to take a minute. I see this guy with that Never Forget t-shirt here. I think for those of us in the room old enough to look back, 23 years ago and can remember that day and the lives that we lost on September 11th, I think we all need to pay attention and think about that as we go about our day today. So just a good thought, I think, as we kick things off for our seminar today. I'd like to also introduce our staff. Tyler on the other end, Jay Rader keeps me in paychecks at the back of the room. Randy Conan you just heard from, and Melissa Hammers, our newest addition. So we've got a great team at the Red River Farm Network, and we're blessed to have all of you folks here for our market panel today. Let's talk about it. We've got a report that's coming out tomorrow. It seems like the trade's pretty much dialed in. We've got a pretty big crop sitting out there. Let's start off, Naomi. What are your expectations as we go into those numbers tomorrow?
Well, I'm not looking for a lot of major tweaks tomorrow. It'll be, I think, small adjustments. Primarily what we're going to want to be watching is yield numbers to see if there's any tweaking there. On the demand side, we've had some little bit stronger than expected exports recently for corn and wheat both, so hopefully we see an uptick in demand, and that might reduce the ending stocks a little bit. But speaking of wheat, thinking of the global marketplace right now and keeping an eye on each country in production, global wheat ending stocks continue to actually trend lower. But in general, we're going to want to watch demand and focus forward on South American production. Not expecting too much out of the report tomorrow.
What are your thoughts, Tommy, going into tomorrow?
Maybe on the initial reaction, like the computers will get the number before all of us, and I do think there's a little chance they could dial down the bean yield just a little bit with how we finished in August, and we could get an initial reaction. And so if I could sell beans up 20 cents, I'd be pretty excited about it, especially coming into harvest. So we'll have orders up there. We'll ask clients to offer at the elevator. We did a little protecting today, but it's not as exciting as past years being here. But a lot of times when we are here in this particular show, we're really making new lows, and we've done one version of that. Many people think we'll have another version because I drove up here this time, Don, and coming through Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, North Dakota, the I-state crops have progressed and dried down really quickly. So it's not my idea, but I was listening to radio on the way here. You know the radio.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
It was XM radio. It was Arlen Suderman. He said, we're going to have an intense harvest. And so if we don't get the pressure from the futures, we might get the pressure from the basis. But just talking to clients, it's going to happen quickly. Not up here. I understand we need more time and stuff, but I-state harvest is going to hit hard. And not everyone has space for everything, of course. And there's going to be grain, regardless of price, that's going to go to town. So long-winded, I'd love to get a pop tomorrow going into the end of the week.
Kristi, your thoughts on this report?
Yeah, I would say what Tommy said as far as if you get a bean rally. I think bean rallies right now are meant to be sold, unfortunately. I know that's probably not what you guys want to hear, but I think that there's a lot of beans around. I think beans have an uphill battle. Right now, you have a lot of attention and kind of lifted the beans off their low of 955 due to dry concerns in Brazil. It's very early in Brazil, and I think most of you would agree you would rather plant in dry conditions as long as it follows up. And so I think once you start to put some rain in the forecast for Brazil, or I say if you do, I think that's going to be really detrimental to beans, and I think you have like a double whammy coming for the bean market as far as a big crop here and also coming in Brazil. So if for some reason we get a bounce, 1060 is still a target on November futures for us. And that's where we would increase marketing, but any sort of rally, I would take that as an opportunity. For a lot of you guys out here right now, there has been a push in basis, especially for soybeans. I think some of that has to come off the PNW just because of low river levels. And I think that demand is coming through. I'm very worried that that basis is not going to stick around, that once you start to see some grain be delivered, that basis is going to widen out. You saw it in spring wheat. I do think post-harvest, you could see favorable basis once again. But if those beans have to go out of town, that's my main concern right now. I'm hoping that you could potentially see a sub 2 billion bushel carry out in corn. I'm not holding my breath on that. But, you know, corn is not as bearish as people want to talk about it right now. The carryout's nothing that we haven't been able to handle with. But when I say it's not that bearish, I mean, my upside targets, I don't know about you guys, would be 20 to 40 cents higher in the near term for corn, and that's about it.
And speaking of those, the bushels per acre and everything, is there, how do you view reported record yields for corn and soybeans as we approach the harvest season? What sort of pressure does that put on the markets for each of those that you guys see?
Well, I think a lot of the larger crop that is expected, for the most part, has been priced into the market already. It's known. That's a fact that the market has been dealing with and working with, and part of the reason that we had the summer sell-off. So right now, the focus is, as Tommy was saying, how quickly this harvest comes in. That'll pressure the market in the short term, but then we'll find that harvest low. From a seasonal standpoint, looking at pricing, corn and soybeans have a tendency to trade just a little bit lower for prices the last 2 weeks of September, but then miraculously start to trade higher during October. And so there'll be some pricing opportunities, and to build on what both Kristi and Tommy have said, because there is such a large crop out there and large carryout, whenever we see any type of rally, it is a selling opportunity. To Kristi's point, the only way really to get out of this would be if something dramatic would happen with South American weather. Market doesn't get overly concerned about that, though, until December or January.
Sure. Does grain remaining in the bin affect it much as well now this close to harvest?
Well, we had a birthday for some 2023 crop. I know your mom and dad are in the audience. Look, we'll point out mom and dad. But I don't know if you know this about North Dakota. I know you guys are from Pennsylvania, but we have a little, sometimes we like to celebrate birthdays for grain. And We just had a birthday party for some old crop grain, and that was evident by the price of September corn. I think it went down to 360, which is scary, somewhere with a 3 and a 6 something. It was not good. That was the futures price. The cash price, we did actually in North Dakota hit 299 cash corn or something like that, but we've come out of that. And that is that old crop, farmers, we're going to hold this and show them, and they showed us.
So it's a low in this market. We usually get that harvest low in September.
I think corn found the low. Corn on a weekly chart put in a bullish key reversal. I think the corn low is here, but it doesn't mean that prices need to just go straight up and rally. We can have a low put in and prices trade sideways to slowly higher for a month before anything really gets going with traction. But I'm not quite sure about soybeans. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm concerned about soybeans as a whole. I think that the rallies, like I said, were a gift. I'd agree that I think the corn low is in. Doesn't mean that we can't test that 385 again if we get some selling pressure coming in. But like Naomi said earlier, that's all we talked about for a month and a half straight was how big this crop is. We had Pro Farmer confirm it. Those were some monster yields that they came out with. And so to really get a new number that could be more shocking to the market, I find that hard to believe that we could see that. Soybeans just have such a burdensome supply right now. The carryout level currently forecasted in soybeans is very, very large. And to build off of that, like any sort of momentum that we could gain from some dry concerns in Brazil, the potential crop that they're forecasting for Brazil, so they're forecasting this crop, it has not been planted yet, but the forecast for it is huge. And so let's say we do run into dry concerns and we do take off a good chunk, let's say, 10, 15% of that production out of Brazil, they're still going to have a very large crop. And when we have a really large crop here, we know that Brazil is the preference for China to come in and buy their beans. And so to me, I'm more concerned about that. To build off of that, I also am kind of pairing together wheat and corn. I think that wheat could have that friendly story behind it as well.
Tommy, you talked about crop already being harvested in Illinois. Didn't you see some of that as you're driving up, or did I hear you wrong?
They were going to start this week, so I drove up on Sunday and I called a couple clients and I said, things are further along than I thought. They said they would start dabbling this week. And one thing I'll say, Advanced Trading is based out of Bloomington, Illinois, and we had some early reported yields from some clients, and they thought they'd be like 78 bushel beans, and they were 72. And of course, farmers want to get that story out to the market, but when those folks who go early, they usually get them planted early. Those are the guys who quietly say they're 82 bushels, don't tell anyone. So if that's a little bit of a trend, then we still have a really big crop, just not quite as big as we think. And then if the corn crop isn't quite as big, then that 2 billion number goes to 1.8 and a problem. And then all of a sudden, corn was just a little too cheap, and we'll look back and go, what were we thinking with that low of a price corn? But there's definitely a big crop out there. We're just arguing over a couple bushels, which now that we have too many beans, we could have a 2-3 lower bushel, and I don't want to say it wouldn't matter. It would maybe add 50 cents, but it's not the $2 move you're all hoping for. That ship's already sailed.
So in Monday's crop progress report, I think USDA said only 34% of the corn in North Dakota was dented. I know this heat is going to help us, and all the seed people are telling me we're going to be fine. But is that a concern, or is North Dakota a fringe state and that's not a big issue? How big of an issue is that going into this harvest season?
I don't like to call my clients fringers, especially Ben back there. He'd get upset. Hi, Benny. We're not a fringe state anymore. When we could plant 4 million acres of corn and quietly yield good yields, we're not as much of a fringe as you think. Minnesota's just, I look at Minnesota as really just northern Iowa, because those boys quietly put up big yields. And you could see that in land prices too. When you see land trade in Minnesota that's tiled and stuff, you're like, the grain belt's changed, and it's because of technology. And I don't know if anyone's really a fringe. I mean, we have some areas in America that are more volatile on production. Texas and up here, we could burn up quick or have problems, but everyone really puts out big numbers. One thing that creeped up, and I only knew it because a young man kept commenting, but the state of Ohio burnt up here the last of August, and that's going to matter a little, but I think you guys will make up. So I think Ohio quietly is going really backwards, and as we finish up here, clients up here who didn't hedge or forward sell, it was because they planted it so late and that they're like, I might be harvesting this stuff in January. It's all systems go. And this is wonderful to see. You told me it was going to be cold. I overdressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I'm so glad I'm sweating. It's good for you.
But if a third of the crop is all that's dented at this point in North Dakota, is that a concern?
Well, I would say like last week, it absolutely was top of mind for the trade and for clients in this area. But as the forecast has changed, of course, things are improving. Had it been cold, had the early frost come, the market would have screamed in response and really paid attention to it. But of course, because the forecast has shifted a little bit, there's a little bit more flexibility there. My fear for you is what drying costs might be at harvest time should things not continue to progress as they are. That would be more of the factor, I think, right now.
Just a quick reminder for our audience, we want this to be a discussion. We're interested in your input. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. Raise your hand. Someone in a red shirt with a microphone will be by. Again, we'd love your input. We'd love to hear what you have and what's on your mind. And then, speaking of late planting, late crop here, need more heat units. How much is that affecting, and corn specifically? Is that affecting the market prices very much here as we approach the end of the line?
I don't think so. I think this year has been that story of, well, if we don't get this, then this could happen. And if we don't get this, this could happen. But we keep getting that, right? Like, we planted late, we planted in the mud, and you're like, okay, we're gonna have shallow root systems, so we need to continuously get rain for this crop because of their root systems. Well, that's what we ended up getting. And you're like, we need until October 1st for a lot of this crop. Well, now we're looking at this fall, and it's getting longer and longer. And so this year seemed to be that year that fit the needs. And so any sort of story that you could potentially bring to the market within a couple weeks, it was handled. And so I'm not too concerned about that overall when you look at it. I think the bigger concern that, people maybe aren't talking about and was confirmed with Pro Farmer was Minnesota yield, right? Southern Minnesota, the corn yield is not there. I don't think the bean one is there. But right now, USDA has the exact same yield year over year for Minnesota. And I think that is probably the more friendly aspect of corn. It's just what other state can make it up. And from what I understand, as long as you get to October 1st, what it looks like at North Dakota is going to have a really big crop. And you continue to say, hey, is this a fringe acre or not? I can't stress this enough. The agriculture boom in North Dakota has been so fun to see. And just the increase of what's been able to be capable in this state has been huge. I started in 2009, and my first year here, a lot of guys were shooting for 165 on a corn yield, and now there's ones touching 200, and it's so fun to see that. It's so fun to see, biodiesel be a centerfold into North Dakota. I think that's been really fun to see as well. But overall, North Dakota is becoming more and more important, and maybe not talked about as much, but I do think it needs to be paid attention to.
Well, I think the market really does pay attention to North Dakota when it comes to soybeans.
Yep.
As definitely top 5 in production, and you are the gateway to the PNW with your beans. I feel like if I'm China, I'm going to be watching what's happening in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, because you have really phenomenal crops here that go out to the PNW. So you are, I don't know, those I states, they're not going to maybe matter as much as they used to. Of course they will, but be proud of what you have coming and going on here in North Dakota, because you are significant to the trading world.
So inflation numbers came out this morning, 2.5%. I think the lowest since, I wrote down, March of 2021 for the lowest annual inflation rate. We haven't had an interest rate cut since 2020. Next week, Fed's going to be meeting. Are we dialed in with a quarter point? Is there still some talk, maybe a half point? What's the expectation for these interest rates going into the balance of this year? Tommy?
It's been volatile. The other day, not a lot of people, everyone knows it 2 years, 10 years, and 30 years, but there's a contract we have at the board called Fed funds. I didn't realize, but I heard on Bloomberg News that the Fed funds had one of its biggest, highest volume, most volatile days the other day, which means bankers and people are readjusting. And so the CME group has if you just Google CME Fed Watch, you can literally watch it every day they'll say there's a 76% chance of a quarter point. So they have a clock ticking telling you when the next Fed meeting. I use the tool almost daily just to kind of keep an eye on it. Where they go a quarter or half, I think that's why the Dow Jones was down 700 earlier today, and then it bounced back. But overall, the trend is that we went through this big inflation cycle. We're coming down. One thing that has been talked about a lot, because we focus on agriculture, is that yesterday when I was driving up here, crude oil was down $3. And the fact that it's just amazing how this happens every election cycle, that we're going to have $2.50 gas. And I'm going to have to rip off those stickers I was putting up on the pumps that said I did that. But, fact is, we have an election in 50 days, and it was wonderful to put $2.75 gas in the old pickup and come up here. So inflation's coming down. We came out of a big cycle of inflation. I'm amazed grains are holding up as much as when I see crude oil down $3, I want to sell corn. And that didn't work yesterday, so I'm happy. That's really great. I see crude down 3, and the trader in me wants to sell 20 corn just because I know it's going to go down, and it didn't. And I kind of look at, well, 1/3 of the corn crop is fuel, right?
Right.
Absolutely. Building on the inflation talk and the interest rate cuts, something to be aware of, I think, going forward, not in the short term, but I think as we get into maybe the second quarter of 2025, as those interest rates come down, big managed money sometimes will take their money and they'll park it somewhere else. And so while they're trading commodities, they haven't been as active in commodities as years past when interest rates were low. You can correlate fund activities and how long they are in the market or buyers versus interest rates. And so when those interest rates come down, the funds are going to start to want to find places to put their money. So this is not going to be immediate gratification for you, but it is something where if there's a weather issue in Brazil this winter, they might want to come back into commodities and start trading again. So, we love the funds when they're long and when they're helping markets go up, but we are not fans of them when they've been sellers in the market like they have been recently. So there's something to be a little bit more optimistic of. Again, I'm thinking more second quarter of next year.
Yeah, I would agree with that real quick. As far as, I think that is one of probably the prettiest pictures of grain markets in general moving forward, is that thought process that you could see those index funds are really short. They can't actually be short, but where they are just not holding that length. And we actually had a conversation with a guy that runs like an ag ETF, and he was saying he has about 1/3 of people involved in his ag ETF than he normally does. And I think that's the situation we could see them come in. I'm just hoping, like Naomi said, that the actual buying comes in a little bit later, because if the buying's coming in right now, I'm just worried it could get offset with some farmers selling that we don't actually get anywhere on it. And I would like to see that movement. So if it could, maybe wait a little bit longer, I think that would be better, not to offset harvest selling pressure.
And those funds being net short for so long, it seems like earlier in the month we may have seen them start to unwind a little bit, relieving some of that pressure. What's going on there? Where the dynamics at work?
Well, the scariness, I think everyone on the panel would agree. I think one week the funds covered 50,000 and we were still down on the week, and that was really scary, because if I told you the funds were going to cover 50,000, we're going to say, oh yeah, but your corn was up 15 cents on the week or something. You just kind of have these numbers in your head. When you say the funds covered 50,000, we're still lower. That goes back to what we talked about 15 minutes ago. That was that old crop corn hitting the funds buying, and that's what absorbed that sales. So they've quietly been covering, and we would hope when you see the funds cover more, we'd see better price action, and we're not seeing that. And they know harvest is coming. I mean, I will say this. I was with a group of professional traders a few weeks ago, and they were really, really, really short beans. So when they got below $10, they sold more. And when they got to $9.55, they asked if I wanted to do a shot of, what's the super expensive bourbon? The super, super, super expensive one. Pappy Van Winkle. We're at a bar in Nashville.
Sure.
And they go, you want a shot of Pappy? Well, what happened was beans went from $9.55 right up to $10.20, and they got hurt on that move. So short-term fund traders, they were so proud of themselves below 10, but we went from $9.55 up to $10.20 so quick. Actually went to like 10.25, 6, 7. It scared them. So they had a huge winning position go to a losing position, and they were extremely uncomfortable. So anyway, I should have taken a shot when I had a chance. I was being polite, and I said, no, I'll just have Woodford Reserve. But they loved themselves that week. No different than you all when corn goes from he got smarter, and it just went from 6 to 7. So they were proud of themselves. But you got to know that when you don't think the market can go up, and I'll sell for all of us, that's why when we're selling these beans off the combine, we're like, let's get some ownership, futures, options, something. You don't know what's going to happen in 3 months. Maybe China comes in and buys it all. We don't know. But historically, as a broker, I've noticed people are more comfortable buying corn after they sell it. And the thing that I think they don't buy enough of is a bean re-ownership. And so I like that there's some friendly news to the beans.
We like talking about the fundamental side of this market. I think it's easier to wrap our brain around, but because of the money flow and so much important on the technical side of the market, how important is some of the fundamental news that we probably pay a lot of attention to day in and day out?
Oh, absolutely. So there's a balance. For me personally, there's 9 things that I'm watching in the markets all the time. Fundamentals are half of them between what's happening in the United States and what's happening in the world. So right now, what we have is the known that the U.S. crop is big. What's upcoming is the unknown about that South American crop, and is there going to be a drought continuing or not? So that unknown is what props that market higher. So it's a delicate balance between the fundamentals, which are essential, but balancing it with what the funds are doing, what the charts are telling us, and what geopolitical arenas are also dictating as well. Because any one day, one of those things can trump the other, but at the end of the day, the fundamentals matter, and that's what dictates price. And right now, the perception is large crop. That's why prices are lower than they've been. But as we head into this next weather cycle with South America, that unknown aspect of what if is what can bring the market price higher. So as a farmer, what you need to do with that, put this on your calendar. And I'm very serious. It wouldn't offend me one bit if you got your phone out right now with your calendar. And pay attention to the seasonals of the marketplace, because there is a strong tendency for grain prices to work higher the last couple weeks of December and into January. And what are you doing? You're snowbirding. You're hanging out with your families. It's Christmas time. You just want to relax, but a lot of times that's when there's some really significant marketing opportunities for old crop and also forward contracting your new crop. So those 3 weeks are as important as Mother's Day to Father's Day for grabbing some pricing highs. So fundamentals matter, seasonals, technicals, the funds, politics, it all weaves together.
You said there were 9 things. What are those 9 things you're looking at?
No pressure. No pressure.
Well,
She didn't really mean that. She was sounding cool.
well, actually there are 9. I actually could do a little speech on it, but I don't want to steal the show. So.
Go to the website, and she'll send you the nine secrets.
Yeah.
But to your point, the timing of all that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Like, I see people get bullish fundamentally, but then the timing of it is it's not the known that makes you go broke, it's the unknown.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And so we see the known all day and digest it and spit it back out and spin it to you, but it's the unknown that nobody in this room knows. And we've had a lot of black swans the last few years. It's something should happen every 25 years, but we talk about 9/11, and then you talk about the COVID, and you talk about other things, financial crisis, and then we have inflation that got pretty good out of hand. We hope we don't have deflation or stagflation, and those are all things that we've probably part of some of those 9, right? Interest rates and everything else. So it's all important, but the timing's so hard.
Fundamentals are so important to the market, and I think it's, like you said, it's the easiest to wrap your mind around, right? I could crunch numbers all day long. Fundamentals are my baby. I love looking at them and diving into them, comparing them to years past. But technicals have been like the real winner for the last few years for these markets. And I think what you need to just really pay attention is when these markets drop off, seeing what the retracements counts are, because these markets have lived into retracements over the last few 6 months, where you get that opportunity when you can come back, let's say 25 or 36% retracement, 56 or 50% retracement. All of those seem to stop the market right away, and you find that selling pressure there. So I think that's one thing you could easily pay attention to, is just kind of finding out where those retracement counts are and working some orders to sell a percentage of your crop at those, because they have been very, very true to this market over the last bit.
So we had a
Kristi,
little debate.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Question?
Kristi, can you I've had a couple people ask me this question about what's the difference between fundamentals and technicals? Don't get in the weeds too far, but
Yeah.
what's the difference?
Yeah, so fundamentals are going to be your supply and demand. Everyone grows up going to school, learning about supply and demand. If there's too much supply, obviously the market is overloaded. There's no reason to price it a lot higher. That's kind of that same situation of that soybeans have a huge crop right now. Why would they rally fundamentally? Well, it's the unknowns like we were talking about, right? That South America might not have something, or the fact that buyers came in and we've been able to retrace to these levels. That's why we looked at this 1031 level, which was literally, like, I think the high for the soybeans near term, like right on the dot. That was a retracement. So those are where you're looking at technical indicators, right? Where the buying comes in, retracement counts, the charting side of things. Whenever you see those fancy charts with all the lines on them, that is not really my jam. I think simplicity is where it's at. But unfortunately, this market is anything but simple right now, right? There's got to be more to it. And so there's those two stories. So like Naomi is saying, I'm sure other things she's focusing on, like she said, are seasonals. Seasonals are very true. I can't reiterate that enough about that Christmas time. Not only do you normally get that buying coming in and getting some opportunities to sell, it's usually a pretty good time basis-wise, because guys get through harvest, they sell what they need for harvest, they shut those bins, and the last thing they want to be doing is delivering grain during Christmas, delivering it into the new year. You're still kind of burned out, right? Like it's not like you're feeling refreshed by that time frame yet. And so a lot of selling does not occur there. So usually you can get some really good basis opportunities there. And also into that time frame of that Christmas time frame, you're switching, especially from corn, from the December contract to the March contract. And in big markets, there's carries, so you can capture on that. That's a concern for us right now, is that these carries in the market to hold your grain are so large. And in these years, typically when your contract goes off, your next contract comes down to those levels. And so that would be a concern, that when you start to have December, it would be March. So, I mean, I rambled on. Everyone that's heard me speak knows that I like talk a ton. But there's so many aspects of these markets you have to pay attention to, but technicals are one of those things that's going to take a little bit of work on your side, of a little bit more paying attention to, but you can reap the benefits from knowing where those levels are.
So we're sitting, 55, 56 days away from an election. Certainly a lot of division. We saw a bit of that maybe in the debate last night. How much attention does the market pay attention to an election?
Oh, huge.
Oh, your eyes got big.
I'm just trying to choose my words. I don't want to Dixie chick myself. Okay, so
Deep breath.
I know. You know, I majored in political science, so I'm a little passionate about this.
Perfect.
Okay, so the political arena is so important, because not only how it affects trade, how other countries then perceive to work with us on trade. So I think, of course, the thought would be, should Donald Trump win, the tariff go back, well, they are in effect, but they really continue in effect and continue at an aggressive pace. And so the market maybe views that as fear. If Harris wins, I think the market would assume that things will continue as they are, and they, in a sense, might know what to expect. So whomever wins, the market is going to respond out of potential fear of the unknown, or the thought that things can continue as is. But it mostly matters, I think, to a lot of our trade partners. And I just need to stop right there.
I would say, to kind of skirt around that question of politics, right? It's like, I truly enjoy talking politics as long as they stay on like a kind, even playing field, and, we don't get rude and everything. So I like talking to them, but I would say, like, a lot of people have asked me this question. It started in the spring, and a lot of people came up to me and said, don't you know that grains rally every election year? And that is something that I have never believed in, because I think that there's other factors why they rallied. So I already put that aside, and I know that this presidential election is so important to this country, but I think looking at the situation and saying, what impact does that have for me, or what impact does it have for me to be talking on a local level, on a state level, about how I can improve agriculture in my country, or how I can do it in my state, or how I can provide new opportunities for the grain around here. And that's exactly what North Dakota did. These biodiesel plants that are coming up provides so much opportunity for you guys that I think that itself has so many folds that help this market. I mean, you're talking about new demand, you're talking about employment for your state, you're talking about the fact that if we do see President Trump in here, if China decides to not buy our beans, we have a place for them in North Dakota. And that is so important. So I think that's such a thing that, don't stop being passionate about your presidential election and what it can do, but make sure you're taking that same passion towards agriculture opportunities for yourself, for your future generations, and what that can provide for your farm yourself.
But China imported record amount of soybeans in August. It was up 30% from last year. But the big punch of that was not from the United States. I guess you kind of talk about the importance of that Chinese market. Have they put their focus on South America? Is that what their chips are, or what are you seeing?
Well, I think that's one of their biggest trading partners at the moment. They've got a pretty good, I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back type of mentality. I think it's also China's way of saying to the United States, we need you, just because they need so much grain that they have to get it from both hemispheres. But it's their way of saying, I need you, but I'm going to just keep you right here. It's like when my kids are fighting at home and they're like holding each other down, my 2 teenage boys. And they're just going to be at an arm's length away, but the need is there. So China going forward, I'm just waiting for them to say to Brazil sometime down the road in the future, oh, we're mad at you for X, Y, Z, and then they come back to us. So it's never what, China says it's what they're doing, but right now their bigger trade partner is definitely South America more than the United States.
Is there much effect? Canada recently imposed some tariffs on EVs, Chinese EVs, and then China's response against Canadian canola. Are you guys seeing much of an impact here on soybean oil from all of that?
I was going to say that for you. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome. That's called a transition, Tommy.
Well, the clients harvesting canola were really upset a week ago in the fact that what China and Canada are fighting about very much short-term affected canola prices here. Any of you who grow canola know that it's very delicate to store, and sometimes it's better to have it in someone else's bin. So, yeah, it affects us, right? Our neighbors to the north, and that, for Naomi's saying, that's China flexing their muscles. So they're very powerful. They're one of our best trading partners, and they're savvy traders. They really, really take what they do seriously. And, of course, they have a lot of mouths to feed, so they should. But I wanted to talk politics, but I'm not going to.
That's restraint.
The only thing, I'm going to say this. The only thing after watching last night's debate is I think after the debate, Barack Obama opened a bottle of champagne and he said, I really am going to get a 4th term. I really feel that with what's happened with the Biden administration, the shifting of the last 20 years of presidencies, we've had a Democrat, President Trump is a Republican, a Democrat, and looking at Donald Trump's stock today was down 18%. I was watching the debate, and I didn't think he did well at all, not even a little. And, it's just interesting because it's going to affect things. We don't know that it's a bad thing, but also there was a big meeting out in Colorado. I think it was the National Grain and Feed Association, and they had projected to see more of a Harris presidency with they're more worried about who gets the Senate, who gets Congress. But the climate in politics is changing, and we can do a little. We each get to vote once, but it's not, it's a big energy. I go to bed and Taylor Swift endorses Vice President Harris, and you laugh, you're like, Grisafi's talking about Taylor Swift, but I would say she's by far the most influential woman in the world. And so I think it matters. Now, if I endorse anyone, I don't know that it really matters. So, but don't fight it. If things are changing, it's going to affect you. You got to make adjustments. Arguing about it with your friends and neighbors isn't going to fix it. Facebook posts don't fix it. My dogs weren't eating last night, in case any of you were wondering. I have 2 Shih Tzus. We didn't lose them, but it was wild. I mean, what's happening politically is wild, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's sad, but I think someone opened a bottle of champagne last night, and I think that was the Obamas. I think they won last night.
Let me switch gears then, get out of politics. We got a lot of cheap corn out there. One way to use that is push it through critters. This cattle market's been very interesting. This beef herd, U.S. beef herd's what, at like a 70-year low or something crazy. The market's been struggling here for a bit. Have we seen a low in this cattle market now in this short term, or what's happening in this cattle market?
Yeah, I think a big concern of me for cattle is that we've talked so long about inventory numbers being low. We know that is. You need to continuously find a new story, right? You can't just keep building off of the same one, similar to the fact that we know we have a big yield, right? We know we have a big crop. We can't keep talking about low inventory numbers. And not only are we kind of over that story, the weights on cattle are so high right now. And so does it matter if our inventory levels are that low, if the weights are making up for a chunk of it? And so I think that's weighing on the market. And I also just think the stock market, live cattle right now are so sensitive. But the nice thing is it does seem like there's a little bit of a separation between futures and where cash is, right? The futures market seems to be extremely sensitive, where cash has been a little bit more reasonable. And I think this is a situation that you can use your insurance, pretty much subsidized puts, right, through your insurance for cattle, that I think you look at those.
Naomi, you're in Wisconsin. I'm a Wisconsin boy myself, so I watch the dairy markets. That's been interesting to watch as well, just because the beef market has helped that Class 3 milk price hold up very strong as well.
Yeah, and also we've had just really strong cheese demand in general. My husband works for one of those major cheese companies, and thank goodness the cheese industry just continues to be strong in general, and our export market is there as well. Milk production numbers compared to years past have been just kind of trending just a little bit lower, and the farmers have had some nice price of milk, $20, $21, just some tremendous value there. But now the question starts to shift going forward. What's the global demand picture going to be like? What is going to be happening now that we have cheap grain costs? Do we see milk production numbers now start to go higher? So I think the milk market's at a little bit of a crossroad, but it's the one bright shining thing happening in Wisconsin right now. Yeah.
So, let's look out these next 60 days. What are you paying attention to? What's your focus?
Well, if you didn't know there was an election, we're going to have harvest regardless. I mean, we're going to have a heck of a harvest. It's going to be intense in the I-states. It's going to hit hard, and we just want to manage that risk and hold your hand and not do anything drastic. I had a client call me a few weeks ago when the markets were at the lows at the same time as in Nashville, and he said he was going to sell his whole entire corn crop the next day. And I was like, wow, and it was a lot. It was like $1.2 million. And I said, that's a little dramatic, and he said, I just don't see how this could rally. And I told him, I'm out with a bunch of people who are celebrating because they don't see how it can ever go up. You don't see how it can go up. That's enough right there. Between them being super bearish and you think the world's ending, I think I'm going to go buy some calls tonight for myself. And I did. And then he didn't do anything drastic. But he was like, why don't I just sell 2 years crop right now? I'm like, that's just pure drama. Don't do that. Think this out. Manage the risk. There's great carries. If the bushels are there and you have the carry, things are going to be not quite as bad as you think. And interest rates are starting to condense. You're coming down. Operating will go out at 7.5%, 8% next year. May surprise you, be even a little lower with great credit. We're just coming into a different time, and you need to adjust to that time. So regardless of the election, if this was 100 years ago, you'd barely know there was an election. You'd be going to the movie theater to get the news. You remember that, Don?
That hurt. That hurt.
Making no friends here. I'll build off of that as far as it goes for the harvest on basis levels. I talked about it earlier, and I kind of pushed on it earlier, but whenever I talk to a grain buyer right now at an elevator, they have a fraction of what they normally have booked on right now. And so we know that the grain needs to find a home. And so I would say that's your main focus over the next 60 days is what has to be priced and what has to be delivered at harvest needs to be talked about with that grain buyer and needs to be addressed. Like Tommy said, you could look at calls because the You have not really seen much movement in these grain markets. Options are really cheap right now, in my opinion. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing to me is that basis level and having that communication with your grain buyer, because I do think that there's a lot coming into town that is not pre-sold and will need to be sold.
And there will be opportunities over the next 60 days, to their point. There'll be opportunities with basis. There'll be like a push higher with futures, but you have to keep it realistic as far as what those opportunities could mean. So for corn, maybe a 20, 25 cent rally higher would be realistic. For beans, to potentially see maybe a 50-cent jump from here would be realistic. As Tommy said earlier in our program, you know, those $2 price moves, not going to happen unless something dramatic happens weather-wise with South America. So just focus on the base hits. The opportunities are going to be there. It's going to be meaning that you have to take a little bit more time with marketing every day, because when those opportunities are there, they're going to be there just in the short term, either with futures prices or with a basis push opportunity. But if you stay on top of it, you'll be able to capture it with your cash.
I'm curious how much use are we using in the options market? Are a lot of farmers utilizing options?
If they're making sales here at this harvest time or with anything with old crop, they've been really exploring it, but having realistic expectations, again, on how high of a rally could the market go in terms of what's a realistic expectation of a return with your option. And so you have to really do the math with it in terms of understanding rate of return and delta and what that can mean for you. And we're kind of going back to the playbook from 2014 to 2019 when we had that trough of low prices. It was the base hits and the consistency with your marketing that made the opportunities there, and not going sky high with expectations and then missing everything. But again, the base hits, because even in 2014 to 2019, every year the market gave you an opportunity to have a great sale for that time period. But a lot of times it was maybe only there for a couple days. So you got to be on your game.
Yeah, the worst thing you can do is take an option and marry it and keep it on its whole lifespan, right? So just because let's say you buy this March option and it lasts into the third week of February, does not mean you need to ride it until the third week of February. Same situation with bins. Just because you have bins does not mean you need to have that grain in the bin for the entirety of that next marketing year and delivering it in August. So if you are utilizing options, just be attentive to it. They're not meant to pick up the entire move of something. That's why they have a defined risk. That is why they have, a percentage, like Naomi talked about, delta, percentage of the move that they make. So be attentive to that. I know a lot of people have been burned by options in the past and they don't want to utilize them in the future, but they are great marketing tools, especially in this circumstance where volatility is so low. I feel like you can get them at a discount buy right now, personally.
So margin protection insurance has a sign-up deadline here at the end of this month. Is that something that should be considered?
It's a choice, right? It's in the toolbox. I know one of my coworkers has been selling a ton of LRP to folks in cattle. It's nothing I'm super qualified to talk about, but I do have folks in cattle who they say, I want to try it, right? They said, how can I learn about LRP? I'm like, by doing it a little, same thing with options. There's so many things you could do with them. I talked to a client the other day, and she said, did you know you could do this, this, and this? I said, of course I knew that. She's like, I've been doing that with 2 lots and 4 lots. It's working every time. I said, that's awesome. The only problem is your farm needs 80 of those. When you get like a Russia invading Ukraine and you're short 80 calls, we're going to become best friends because we're going to talk 3 times a day. Somehow you're going to hate me and I'm going to get fired because the thing you learned to do with 2 and 4 lots works so well. And so my point is when markets go down, people try to get over creative to compensate. So the best advice I could give you all is even if you have a loss, try to minimize losses. So a lot of times you'll see a panel like this and they say, you ask a question, what's your goal? Oh, to help farmers make a profit. Think of it more on down years, per Naomi's points. I started in 2014, so this feels exactly like that 14, 15, 16 scenario. If you could lose less than your neighbor during bad times, you have a really good chance of buying their ground when they sell it. And so it's not so much about making a profit. I get terribly disappointed when I hear people say the word profit, feel like they're lying to you. And really, from a rules and regulations, they kind of are, because if you say profit, you better be writing a check if they don't get it, right? So look at it more from losing less during bad times, because when the good times are good, they're phenomenal. When the price shoots up and the bushels are there, we had some monster years. And you can see that reflected in land prices. I would be so much more worried for this room if I saw a section go up for sale and it went no sale. That's not happening. You're seeing record land prices in North Dakota and Minnesota. They calmed a little, but they're still relatively high. So the wealth is in the land. The growing the grain is one of the byproducts of, if you're gonna own that land, you need to rent it out or grow the grain. And so manage that part. But I'm really optimistic about what's happening. A couple weeks ago, though, I was scared to come up here, but I'm not as scared anymore. Because it felt so bad. It felt really bad and dark. Those, like when it feels horrible, those are the buying opportunities, but it's hard to do.
You know, you mentioned Russia, Ukraine. When that war happened, markets had a severe reaction. I think it feels like fatigue has set in. It hardly makes the evening news anymore. But we still, that shipping channel through the Suez Canal was always very important to move products into the Southeast Asia, those kind of things. And now they got to go all the way around Africa. It probably works when oil's at one level, but if crude is, $30 higher than it is today, that changes that scenario. Should there be more attention on what's happening in some of those trouble spots around the world?
Yeah, it makes you wonder why we're so immune to it, because it still is a significant issue. But unless you don't want to see it escalate, you don't.
Right.
But unfortunately, unless something truly escalates, the market's immune to it right now. So it's searching for the next big thing, the next headline, the next story. But yeah, you always have to keep an eye on those geopolitical things, because they can be those black swans that make markets either go significantly lower or higher.
You think about 9/11, which is today, and we lost close to 3,000 lives. I'm not sure the totals. Maybe someone could Google it for me. But it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands. They talked about it on the debate last night a little bit. But both sides, both Ukraine and Russia, have lost hundreds of thousands of lives. And it's never on the news anymore, you're right. And we've went past that news cycle. But it doesn't mean there's not thousands of people dying weekly fighting this battle. And it's unfortunate. There's some things you say politically. That one, I don't even, I do understand. One thing I will say about the Ukraine war, I did sit down and watch the Tucker Carlson interview with Putin. And it was like a history lesson, because Putin said, "Can I just talk for a minute?" And he pulled a Tommy. He went 45 minutes straight. And I was like, that was impressive. And he told this whole history story, and I didn't realize all the history of what's happened with Ukraine and Russia, but we never talk about it anymore. It's unfortunate. So we're humbled today to be here 23 years later. They're still fighting the war. They're probably losing that many people a day.
Yeah, I don't think it's talked about enough either, and I will bring it back to what Naomi first mentioned in the beginning, is that the only thing that's really shrinking when you look at it is world carryout in wheat. And so I think that it should be paid much closer, especially for the wheat market. And if it does escalate, I don't feel like any of that premium is even priced into the markets right now. And I think it could have that, but for now, it just seems like the market's shrugging it off. But it really should be factored in more for wheat, just because of the carryout levels, especially if you look at the carryout levels for the world. If you take China out of the situation, we don't really have a ton of wheat around.
We've got to fly bomb the stage. Boy, it's attacking us up here. We're getting close to wrapping things up. Give me your takeaway message. What do you want these folks to go home top of mind with, and they're making their trip out of here today? What's your takeaway message?
Keep your expectations real. Be on top of your marketing in terms of my thought for this year, unless there's a dramatic weather issue with South America or something really unforeseen with the elections, keep aware and abreast of the seasonal situation with prices, because in a lot of years that works. Again, past performance, not indicative of future results. However, the seasonals are pretty good. So if you're thinking about cash sales for old crop, new crop, that Christmas timeframe is a good one. And then Mother's Day to Father's Day is your next window. And when are you busiest? Christmas, Mother's Day to Father's Day. That's you're busy with life. But that's a lot of times when your best marketing opportunities are there. So focus on those and be ready with cash sales and get ready to pull the trigger.
Tommy?
Adding to that, just the cost of money's changed, so pretend we weren't grain farmers, just that we owned a business and we had to borrow $1 million to $10 million a year. That cost of money, we went through that time of 07 to 19, we had a little bit of interest rates, and then we came down for COVID. The cost of money has changed so much and the cost of production's changed so much that you come to a meeting like this hoping and hearing that we say grains go up a little, and I have the exact same goals, 25 cents in corn, 50 in beans, that's a real rally. But the whole time the clock's ticking on the money part, and from trading bonds my whole life at the board, I think you're losing way more money, way more dollars from the cost of money than you are from the price of the grain markets being down. Because when interest rates are high, you don't see the effects of it it's always a year later, So this year, when you renew your operating, I'd like all of you to write down what you paid. Now, some of you don't have operating, that's awesome. But for those of you who do, the cost of money, and even for those of you who don't have operating, there's still a cost of money. So when you store your grain and watch it go from 5 to 4 and say that's okay because I don't have operating, you still had the loss, and you had it in two ways. Corn went from 5 to 4, that's a true story. But you also could have been making 5% the whole time sitting on a beach. And that's really sad because I like sitting on beaches. So I watched it happen. It's like a real slow moving car wreck. There's a car crash exhibit down there, and it's kind of like what we're seeing. But no one got hurt. You went backwards, and no one told you, because we focus so much on price and goals and having targets. But the financial part of it was the real wild one here. The boom bust, that has a bigger effect on the future of agriculture than, I assume you're all awesome farmers, you're gonna grow big bushels, you're gonna forget to sell it, you'll be here next year, we'll tell you, we'll try to help you. These two on my left and right are the best in the industry, but you have to be the best. You could hire anyone, and if you don't rise to being better, you're going backwards.
Kristi?
Yeah, I would reiterate on that, the cost of money, right? I had somebody tell me the other day that he didn't need to sell any grain until March. He didn't need the money. Well, so you don't need the money doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing something, right? So you guys are so good at growing a crop. You guys put so much effort into your decisions on seed, on fertilizer, all of those situations. Just put a little bit of effort towards marketing and treat your farm as a business. That's one of the hardest things I think farmers struggle with, is that they focus so hard on growing that crop because they're so proud of it that they kind of forget that they're an actual business, right? And so treat it as a business, be making those decisions, and just put a little bit of effort towards your marketing. You could spend all the time in the world, be charting your own charts, be researching all the fundamentals. You could be doing all of that, but it's also as simple as just working some orders, saying, hey, I know I can make money at this level. I'm going to sell this percentage of my crop here. And guess what? You call your elevator, you call your marketing broker, you work that order, and you don't have to worry about it moving forward. So just be attentive to that. I would reiterate, 25 cents in corn, 50 cents in beans. I'm not all that optimistic. I'm not all that much of a bear when it comes to corn and wheat. Beans scare me a little bit, to be honest, but just be realistic, work those targets, know your break-evens, and make sure you're working towards doing something at some levels.
10 seconds. Where can folks get a hold of you, Kristi?
Yeah, you can call me at 1-800-648-5494. There's a bunch of guys in the office, too. We all love to talk. We talk way too much.
Tommy?
I started live streaming. Don's been a great mentor. Every day we go live at 9 on the Advanced Trading YouTube channel. I've met people from all over the country, and it's really been beneficial. Thank you for your help. I called you several times. Matter of fact, the first time I ever recorded, you did a demo session. No one's ever seen that, but they probably never will. It wasn't too good, but there's a lot of ways of getting educated, and the world's changed a lot recently.
Naomi?
Yeah, so look up Total Farm Marketing online, and then just call the number, ask for Naomi. I'm happy to visit with you. Or my email address is on there, and as long as you don't send me anything weird, I will reply to your email. I'm happy to do that. That's what I do. I love to answer questions and teach along the way. So please feel free to reach out. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, we got a rock star panel right here. I really appreciate making the trip and being with us. Please show your appreciation if you would.
What is impossible? 150 years ago, this was impossible. 120 years ago, this was impossible. And 70 years ago, this was impossible. By 2050, our planet will be home to 9 billion people. And feeding everyone may seem impossible, but that's just because it hasn't been done yet. At Mosaic, helping the world grow the food it needs isn't just our job, it's our mission.